Hello, my name is Julie, and today I am going to be finding out if I met my 2025 reading goals, and I'm going to be setting some new ones for 2026. I am a goals-oriented person. I am a person who loves a to-do list, and I am really driven by reading goals specifically. I might not get everything done in my personal life, but reading goals are something that I really prioritize to help drive my reading for the year. So I think it's really important for me to see, did I actually do what I set out to do? I think I did. I know what my TBR lists were for the year, and those are things that I really push myself for, but I have not reminded myself of what my major goals for the year were. So we're going to be going back and watching my 2025 goals, and I'm going to tell you how I did with them. And then I'm going to set my goals for 2026. We'll see, was I too ambitious? Am I too ambitious now? And let's get started with the video.
My name is Julie. I've got some boba, and we are going to talk about my 2025 reading goals.
I have some Sprite cranberry as my drink. Nice. I really don't drink soda that much, but I do love Sprite cranberry. So I knew that I had a beverage in this video, so I got one for this video.
Let's start with those reading challenges. So first off, I do a bingo board on my Instagram every single month. I have made an annual challenge for the last 2 years, and this third year, the annual challenge is every single month. There's going to be a different page range of a book that you are going to read.
So I actually did do this challenge, and I did do it successfully. There were a couple of books that I had read that the length that was listed on Goodreads was not exactly the right length of the physical copy that I had. If you count Goodreads page count of these books, I absolutely did fulfill this challenge. And this is what I did. These are the different books that I read. It was easy to find books over 600. It was really hard to find anything between 500 and 600. And then it was hard for me to find books that I was interested in that were less than 250.
And then I am also going to be doing the Buzzwordathon and now the Buzz Cover Challenge. Every single month of 2025, there's going to be a title prompt and a cover prompt.
I am also going to be doing the Buzzword and the Buzz Cover Challenge this year. The Buzz Cover Challenge was fairly easy for me to find stuff off of my TBR in 2025, and I did complete this. This is my Buzzword Challenge books that I read, and then the Buzz Cover Challenge books that I read. The reason I like this challenge so much is I like going through the TBR that I already have and having books randomly selected for me that I might not have prioritized otherwise and getting them off of my TBR. So that's why I continue to do this challenge. And I do have that as one of the 2026 challenges that I'm going to be doing. Though I do think that this year's is only more difficult than last year's.
I am going to be doing my 12-12-12 challenge, the 12 books, 12 friends, 12 months challenge, in which different people who know my taste suggest me books. And this year I did it a little bit differently because I have 3 people from my real life who I asked to suggest me books.
I did complete my 12-12-12. I actually completed this in June, I want to say, but all 3 of my in real life friends gave me absolutely fantastic book recommendations that I loved and continue to want to talk about. So that was the thing that I was most pleased with, is that the people who know me in person gave me things that I absolutely loved. If I actually can scrape together enough recommendations for this, I am going to be doing it.
Now let's do my more specific goals to me. My first one, how many books do I want to read this year? My goal for the last 3 or 4 years has been set at 100 books. If something were to happen, it's still something that I feel like I can achieve. The last 3 years, I have smashed that out of the water. In 2024, I read 147 books, so that's definitely not going to be a problem. In fact, I think I would like to read fewer books than that, or maybe fewer pages than I did last year, because I definitely felt like I was pushing myself too much. And that led to me not having as high of comprehension in books that I wasn't really feeling. And I would rather have a more fun reading experience.
So read 100 books has been my goal for the last several years, and I did knock this out of the park. I have read, at this point in the year, I think 133 books. I passed that in October-ish. And I did read fewer books and fewer pages than I did last year, but I definitely definitely still felt that strain on myself. So this is a goal that I can carry forward.
Goal number 2 is a goal that I definitely had in 2024 that I was working on in the latter half a lot, and that is to lower the number of series I am in the middle of. At the beginning of 2024, I had 51 series that I considered myself to be in the middle of. And at the end of 2024, between starting new series, finishing series, and DNFing ones, I ended up with 52.
So she's having a boba break. I'm gonna have a Sprite break. I did get my series down. That was my number one major goal for the year, was getting my number of series down. I said 52 series there. It turns out that a standalone that I read that in 2024 became a companion series. So it became 53 series that I was in the middle of. And I believe at the end of the year, I'm going to have only 36 that I'm in the middle of. I read fewer first books in series than ever. I read about the same number of conclusions as I normally do. That's usually how many series I have ready to wrap up. And I think I have that many about for 2026. I also read more sequels, so middle books in series than ever. But the thing that really made a difference was DNFing series I was no longer interested in, that I was just feeling meh about. There were only 2 series that I read a book and decided to DNF the series, but there were a ton of books that I decided to DNF without having picked up the next book. The 36 number is a number I'm really proud of. I think this is so much more manageable that I could definitely get through reading all of these books and like maybe DNFing a couple of them, but trying out a couple that I wasn't sure about.
Goal number 3 is generally to make sure my book collection matches my taste. That means I want to unhaul books that I wasn't a fan of, and also about buying. In the last couple of years, I've started really using used bookstores around me, and maybe I should pump the brakes a little bit because I feel like I'm picking up books just because I recognize them at a used bookstore and I'm like, oh my God, let's go get it. And then I don't read them for years. I want to make sure that the books that I'm buying aren't just because they're cheap, they're actually books that I'm anticipating.
This is something, I actually had this on my list of goals for 2026. I didn't realize that this was on my 2025 goals, but I do think that I did this in a couple of ways. Number one, I unhauled more books than ever. The vast majority of them were books that I already read. I sold them on my Pango. If you want to see used books of mine that I want to get rid of, or sometimes they're books that I haven't even read, so they're not even used, I just bought them. You can check out my Pango in the link in the description, or I will sell them to my local bookstore, or I will put them in little free libraries. And then on the other side of that, only buying books that I was really interested in. This year, even though I hauled more books this year than I did in the previous year prior to Christmas. So in 2024, 42% of the books that I hauled pre-Christmas, I had not read by the end of the year. And in 2025, even though I actually hauled a couple more books than I did in 2024, less than 30% of them stayed unread. So I really was buying books that I planned on reading pretty much immediately. That does mean that we have a backlog of books that have been sitting on my shelf that I haven't been touching. And I don't think I did that great of a job of reading the books that I bought used. And the problem is not that I'm reading used books. The problem is because a book is cheap or free, I am picking up books that I am not already excited about. That's the problem. I did better at this year. I think I can get even better than that.
Then my next goal is reading more of a genre and reading less of genre. I would like to read more books that are in the literary fiction, general fiction sphere. I feel like I had a lot of success with the books that I was picking up in 2024 that were in that sphere. I'm kind of craving that sort of book right now. I don't mood read a lot, but if I was to mood read right now, like that's the kind of thing that I'm feeling. Books I would like to read less of. I would like to read less fantasy romance and possibly less romance period.
Okay, half success, half failure. I actually had this on my list of, again, 2026 goals I had. I did not read more general fiction in 2024. I'm actually going to check. So I read 17 books that I labeled as general fiction in 2025. In 2024, I read 15 So technically, both numerically and proportionally, I did read more general fiction, but like not to a really noticeable degree. So that is something that I would like to do going forward. However, romance and romantasy, I absolutely did this. I think I'll only have read like 9 romance books by the end of the year, so less than once a month. I did focus on books that I owned and authors that I've already read from before, and I think that was good. I've really got the number of romance books on my physical TBR down. There's 5 right here, and I think that's all of the ones that I own. I cut out fantasy romance almost entirely, and the one that I do remember reading, I did not like. So I did succeed in that, and I didn't find a lot of romance favorites, unfortunately. There was only, even though I was sticking to books that I really thought I would love, I didn't actually find a lot of romance favorites. I found fewer than last year and the year before that. And that's because I'm reading fewer, but I think I did have some disappointing ones this year.
Then I have one huge book, one TBR veteran. It is also, I think, the longest book on my TBR. I have owned this book since I was probably 13, and it is finally time for me to read Les Miserables by Victor Hugo.
I am in the middle of Les Mis right now. I have been reading it over the course of 3 months, and I have successfully been doing that. I feel pretty proud. I am behind. I think I have about 600 pages left to read in December, and I am planning on it. I am liking it so far, but I 100% understand why so many people read abridged versions of this book, because it is so long and so detailed about a lot of things that don't actually matter to the plot of the book. When we're focusing on our characters, I really enjoy the book and I get something out of it. But when we're talking about this convent that Jean Valjean visited for a couple of days, and like we're just talking about the lives of the nuns for a long time, I'm bored. He literally has a line where he says, "This part isn't going to be important to the story, but I'm going to tell you anyway."
My last reading specific goal that I'd like to do is to chill out with the rules that I keep imposing on myself about reading. Let's go through what a couple of these rules are. 1, I really don't DNF books.
Okay, I'll tell you, I chilled out a little bit this year, but not enough. And I do think my neuroses are a problem that I'm trying to like work through, like relaxing about these things. But these are like guidelines that I put up because that's what I'm comfortable with. The idea was not to break these rules, but to push the boundaries on them. So DNFing a book, I did not DNF a single book in 2025. And if you have watched all my videos, you know that I read one of my least favorite books of all time this year. I was absolutely disgusted and I hated it from the first page. And I just wanted the book to get better, so I kept reading. I almost DNF'd it. And then I was like, there's not that much left. Let's push through. If there's one more bad incident that happens in the book, I won't finish it. And there was no more bad incident in the book, but it stayed terrible the whole time. And I think that that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back, that if I ever feel that badly about a book again, I will DNF it. But no, I did not do that goal this year.
And tying into that and one of my previous goals, I'd like to let myself DNF series more.
As we talked about before, I did absolutely DNF more series, and my burden is lighter for it.
I also have a rule where I kind of try not to read an author more than once in a year. By the same token, but even stricter, not reading more than one book in a series in a year.
So for this one, I did read a lot of authors more than one time this year. Funnily enough, this year is the first time in a long time that I have not read an author more than twice. There are a ton of authors that I read exactly twice this year, and none that I read 3 or more. But I wasn't afraid to read a book by an author more than once. And then sequels, because I was trying to spread it out, there was one series that I read twice this year, and that was Dungeon Crawler Carl. And everything else was only one time because of my major series project. It is more effective to clear out as many sequels as possible across the different series in case I want to DNF series. So I only repeated one series this year, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I have, because of the method that I did this year, I'm going to be doing that more because I've opened the door now. So I prepped myself to be able to hit that goal this year.
One thing that I am absolutely particular about, I do not let myself roll a book over to the next month. I had one book that I did that in 2024, and it was not my fault.
What kind of happens with this is that if I read the majority of the book in the first month, I would rather push myself to read it before the end of the month than let it roll over into the next month. I don't normally have a problem when I have only like 1 day left in the month, start on my next month's TBR early. I did do this year in the case of Les Mis. Otherwise, I don't necessarily think I really tried doing this goal very much.
Another rule that I have for myself is I don't really reread books.
So this year I reread more books than ever because I reread 2 books, and I reread them in the same month, actually. I reread Pride and Prejudice, which I have been telling myself I was going to do for years. This is the first time I read it since I was in middle school, and I had a great time. And then I also reread The Will of the Many because I didn't remember it, for getting into The Strength of the Few. And of course, that's why you're all here, because I made that video about recapping The Will of the Many.
And my last one is something that I kind of felt myself doing towards the end of 2024, trying to make sure that fantasy was my most read genre.
I do think I threw that out in terms of I was not trying to make fantasy my most read genre. However, because of 2 other goals that I was trying to do. Number 1, I was trying to read a lot of books that I thought would be in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I ended up reading 10 out of the 20 over the course of the year. And number 2, I was trying to get through all of these sequels, and the vast majority of those are fantasy. So I read a lot of fantasy this year, and I think I might have read, did I read more than last year? According to my stats, I read the exact same number of fantasy in 2024 that I did in 2025, and I read fewer books in 2025. So I did naturally read fantasy more, but I think that in this year, I am going to do this going forward.
Content-wise, I do have a couple goals. One, I would like to make some more recommendation videos.
I did make a handful of recommendation videos. I was much more pushing myself to make recommendation videos when I normally would not have. And I think they're very good, like filler things when I don't have something that is time specific and I have like a slot open. So was proud of myself for doing this, and a couple of them did all right.
Number 2, I would love to get to 1,000 subscribers if possible. Last year, I did end up doubling my subscriber count, so if I do the exact same thing this year, I will get to 1,000 subscribers. So I'd love to do that. That means I would be at the point where I would be able to monetize my channel, and that means that I would be able to put money back into the channel.
Right as I published the Will of the Many video this year, I hit 1,000 subscribers. What I didn't know at this time is that there's also a watch hour limit. So you have to have at least 4,000 watch hours in 365 days in order to get monetized. So with the Will of the Many video, that pushed me over the 4,000. I did do this, and I am now over 2,000 subscribers. So through my hard work throughout the year, I doubled my subscriber count to 1,000. And then with a singular video, I doubled my subscriber account again. So I quadrupled my subscribers in 2025, and I can't believe that that happened to me. I'm really proud of that.
And I'd also like to swap to a new editing software.
I did switch to a new editing software that is working much better for me, but I do think because there are so many like AI features on this, so I would maybe like to try another one this year, but I did successfully do this, and I am more satisfied with the experience because of it.
I'm going to talk about my 20 in 2025. These are books that I am going to force myself to read in 2025.
Now we have my 20 in 2025. Did I read them all? The answer is yes. I have read all of them, but one of them I'm in the middle of. So by the end of the year, I will have completed my 2025. Before we go into my 2026 goals, I want to shout out a couple things that I did not plan for in my goals that I was really proud of that I did in 2025. So number 1 is I started annotating more books on a first read. I don't annotate books a lot. Normally, I only annotate books that I'm reading again because you don't know if it's going to be a book that you love. I'm not the type of person who loves a lot of wear on their books. Now, when I do annotate, I use really light pencil to underline sections I like. And there were more books this year than ever that I felt connected to immediately that I was really getting something out of, and that was great. I've made the most significant dent in my TBR than ever. I do believe by the end of the year, I will be in the net negatives, which I have barely done before, but I think I really worked on getting my physical TBR down. And I also did more immersive reading when I had the ability. A lot of the times when I was reading like a classic or a book that was, at least 30 years old, there would be an audiobook available from my library and I would do immersive reading. And I do think that enhanced my experience with a lot of books that I read. So now we can talk about what I want to do in 2026. So the goals that I have this year, there were actually way more overlap of my goals for this year and last year than I thought. So there's fewer things for me to talk about, but let's talk about my reading goals. As always, I do want to read 100 books in the year. I have no need to ever move this number up. I want to just enjoy the books that I'm reading. The number one goal that I have for 2025 is not just numerical, is that I want to purposefully be reading more books that I think I'm going to love or give a 5-star. And that is going to be conflicting with one of my later goals. But I had a vlog that I did this year where I read the 3 books that were the biggest 5-star predictions that I had for the year. And all 3 of those books were 4.5 and above. I have been feeling really weird whenever I do a wrap up that I feel like I picked a strange collection of books to read, and it doesn't make any sense why I picked some of those books. And what I would like to do is read fewer books that I believe going into them are not going to be at least a 4.25 star. Obviously, there are some books that are going to surprise me, but I don't know why I'm prioritizing so many. And one part of this goal is I want to read fewer books only because of the author, that I loved a book from them before, and now this book doesn't sound as interesting to me. I want to stop doing that. But then also, I want to focus less on 2026 releases. Let's let some time for those books to marinate, for more people to talk about the books, and for me to make a better decision about whether I want to read them or not. My next goal is I'm building upon what I was saying last year where I wanted to curate my collection. I want to do the other goals in curating my collection that I did not do last year. So I want to read the books that I got in 2023 or for cheap or free. And those 2 goals overlap. I had a video this year that I did where I told you every single book I had on my physical TBR. And what I noticed is that 2023 was the year that I have the least amount of books that I am interested in without them also being like classics or something like that. If you look at books that I hauled 2022 and before, they fall into 3 categories almost unanimously: a classic novel, a nonfiction, or a Stephen King book that I was given from a garage sale. I have some stats for you. Where are you? There you are. I left my stats sheet. There are 20 books that I own that I got in 2023 that I still have not read yet, that I have not unhauled. 2 of those books I bought full price for myself. 3 of them are gifts that I specifically asked for. 5 of them were gifts that were given to me that I was not very excited for one reason or another. And 10 of them were cheap or free. Only a quarter of the books that I still have on my TBR I was really excited for. So I want to either unhaul a lot of these books that I'm not necessarily interested in anymore, or I want to get through reading them. I want to go through and sample a ton of these books and see if there's still something I'm interested in, because there were a lot of books that I just bought because I saw them and recognized them and I was like, oh, it'll be a great idea. But if I had seen them at the library, I probably wouldn't have picked them up. I want to get rid of that and kind of remove that culture from my mind of buying things just because they're cheap. Next up, I do want to continue keeping my series in check. I think that number hovering around like 25 to 30 is something that is way more manageable, especially if these series are ongoing and continuing. One thing I'd like to focus on is I definitely want to make sure I read the sequels that I did not read in 2025. There are 9 series that I did not read from in 2025, and I am behind on. 2 of them are because I think I might restart the series. One of them, we have no news of if the series is ever going to finish, and I don't plan on continuing the series until we have a pub date for the last book. 2 of them were late in the year 2025 releases, and I just didn't have time to read them. And 4 of them are books that ideally I should have read or DNF'd. For sure, I want to pick up those 4 books and the 2 2025 releases as well. So those are 6 I 100% want to read. And then I kind of want to figure out with those 3 oldest series on my TBR, do I want to DNF them for now? Or if I plan on continuing the series, should I not consider them DNF'd? And then the last goal I have is part of that rereading thing. I would like to reread The Hunger Games in order to read the prequels in 2026. I have not reread The Hunger Games since I was in 5th grade. When Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, I had no interest in it because I did not think it was getting good reviews. I really wasn't hearing buzz about it. But then Sunrise on the Reaping came out, and it's pretty universally been loved, even by people who didn't like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Specifically, I want to shout out the Hunger Games teacher on Instagram, who has been the person who has encouraged me most. Like, me seeing the Hunger Games teacher break down these books and how symbolic and how well crafted they are, I would really like to return to that. So I want to reread the entire trilogy read the 2 prequels all in time to go see the movie that's coming out almost exactly a year from now. Then I'll talk about some YouTube and related goals that I have. I would like to get to 3,000 subscribers this year. I think that's totally possible given like I have a little bit more like leverage now with the 2,000 subscribers I do have. So I think doubling my subscriber count, while it's possible, I think that's too ambitious for me to hope for. So I'm hoping to get to 3,000 subscribers, and hopefully at that point, I'll be sustaining the amount of watch hours I need to be fully monetized and stay that way so I can put money into this channel. I also have plans to launch a brand new readathon in 2026 that is based on one of my special interests and something I've made a video about before, but it was a long time ago. I have 2 different ideas for related readathons that are probably going to appeal to the same amount of people. It's definitely going to be kind of niche. I'm not going to say what it is yet. I have teased it on Instagram before. Look out for that, hopefully in like late spring, early summer. Then I would also like to finish a year-long project I have been doing since April. I have a secret project that I have not told anybody about. I think one person commented something on one of my YouTube videos and I gave them like a winky emoji or something like that. One person has like a nod to what I've been doing, and I think it'd be really interesting, and it is stats related. And then also, I would like to challenge myself to watch more new booktubers. Last year, I found a lot of people that I was interested in reading from doing like my Booktubers Best vlog, but I didn't actually sustain watching a lot of the people because I already have such like a heavy rotation of not just booktube, but like YouTube that I watch, that I would like to dedicate a little bit more time to trying to find new channels, especially because some of the channels that I love watching are because of the content and not necessarily because of the book recommendations. And I would like to try to find more book channels that I love the content that are also a little bit more aligned with my reading tastes. So I completely finished doing the video and then realized hours later I had forgotten to do my 20 and 25. So I had fully taken off my makeup, had to put a little bit of it on again because I refused to do it all the way. But now I can give you my last goal, my 20 in 2025 TBR. 2025, 2026, 20 books that I have decided I have to read before the end of the year. I have split these into 5 categories. Most of these are books I own or am expecting to own by the end of the holiday season. And most of these are books that I would consider to be 5-star predictions with a few exceptions. I'm going to give them in no particular order, but my first category is sequels I need to read. I do have 7 series that I could finish out in 2026, given I only read 1 book in a series. But most of these that I have on here are sequels, not conclusions, just because they're the things that I'm most excited about. So first up, I want to talk about The Battle Drum by Sara El-Arifi. This is the 2nd book in the Ending Fire trilogy. I read The Final Strife and it blew me away, totally shocked me how much I loved it. This is an African and Arabian inspired fantasy trilogy where there is a blood class system. We are following 3 different girls from 3 different blood classes. In the first book, there is a competition of who's going to be emperor, and our main character is supposed to be in on that, but she has been struggling so much with addiction that we're not sure she's actually going to be able to do it. The way that I felt about this book is the way that I felt about YA fantasy when I was a teenager. I just loved the balance of character, world, plot. Then I would like to read The Tempest Blade by Danielle L. Jensen. This is the final book in the Bridge Kingdom series. This isn't in my 2026 releases category because technically it's already out on Audible, but I don't have an Audible anymore. Like I'd have to mooch off of a friend and like, whatever. I'm waiting until the book's released. This is a fantasy romance 6-book series that is comprised of 3 duologies. It is a world that is not our own, but there is actually no magic in it, which is really fascinating. So it is just a pure political fantasy. Each duology follows a different couple, and this last book is taking place in a location that is a little bit more Regency inspired than the rest of the world. Then I'd like to read The Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. This is the 3rd book in Dungeon Crawler Carl. I have a friend of mine who's loaning me these. It is a lit RPG about a man and his cat who are forced to go into a dungeon crawl under the earth for aliens for a reality show across the universe. I like to pitch this as if Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and The Hunger Games had a video game baby. Loved book 1, one of my favorite books of the year. Book 2 I thought was okay, but all of the books get longer from there, and that was kind of my problem with it, that it felt filler. Then we have Behind Me, Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in the 2nd Mistborn series. I was a little bit let down by Shadows of Self, but that seems to be the general consensus. This is a world in which people can consume metals and have magical abilities based on them, them. And in this second series, it's a little bit more modern. It's set in like a turn of the century setting, which is very interesting for a fantasy. And I've heard that this book is where the series gets emotionally devastating. I don't want to just stack up this whole series category with fantasy. So just like last year, I'll be putting Richard Osman on this list with The Impossible Fortune. This is the 5th book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I've thoroughly enjoyed them all. This is about a group of septuagenarians in a retirement community who solve crimes together. One of the people in their lives is going to be getting married, and something is going to go wrong at the wedding. Then we have 2026 releases that I'm looking forward to. No Matter What by Cara Bastone right now is my most anticipated book of 2026. I have given Cara Bastone's 2 previous books 5 stars each. I love them both. This is like my perfect romance author. And in this book, there is a married couple who went through a traumatic car crash and have been on the rocks ever since. He's about to move out, but then she enrolls in a drawing class that his brother is hosting. Her husband's going to be her model. I've really loved Marriage in Peril in the past, so I'm hoping that one of, if not my favorite romance authors, is going to do a trope I like really well. And we have The Last Contract of Asako by Fonda Lee. This is a sci-fi space opera that is pitched as corporate samurai in space. Her main character is this swordswoman. Her best days are behind her. She's ready to retire, and someone reaches out to her for one more job. Then we have one that is actually a sequel, but it's a 2026 release, but it is one of my most anticipated 2026 releases, and that is To Ride a Rising Storm by Monoquill Blackgoose. This is a YA Indigenous-inspired fantasy in which our main character is an Indigenous girl. She finds a dragon egg, but there's not supposed to be dragons where she lives anymore, and the people who colonize her people come and say, hey, you have to go to our dragon rider school, or we'll take the dragon away from you. And so she has to go to this place where all these people discriminate against her. And I loved the implications that we had coming out of book 1 going into book 2. Then my next category is authors I've read from before, books that are not coming out in 2026 that I really want to pick up. First up, this copy of Anxious People, I don't know if you can see it right now, has been freaking staring at me for years. I've owned it for ages and ages and ages. I read the whole Beartown series instead of reading it. And Anxious People is about a group of people who are held up at a bank robbery and their lives. Another one that has been staring at me on my TBR for a long time is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I read Intermezzo instead last year. I loved Intermezzo so much. I've loved the 2 Sally Rooney's I've read. Do I know what it's about? No, it's general fiction. I think it's about a group of friends. Next up, we have Red City from Marie Lu. This is actually a late 2025 release, so I could have put it in a different category. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? These are fake. This is a adult fantasy that takes place in either an alternate or future LA, where alchemy is the magic, and there are 2 alchemical rival mafia families. And then I also have, I don't know if you can see this, but The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I have owned this for probably 3 years now, so before I read The Will of the Many, actually probably before The Will of the Many came out. I just remember the synopsis is that it's like a really classic fantasy series. It has been 20 years since the godlike augurs were overthrown and killed. Those who once served them, the gifted, were spared only after accepting the rebellion's 4 tenets, which vastly limited their powers. And our main character, Davian, suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was even born, and he discovers that he wields the forbidden power of the augurs. And to the west, a young man whose fate is intertwined with Davian's wakes up in a forest covered in blood with no memory of who he is. Very, basic fantasy premise, but I'm excited, and it's big and chunky. Who doesn't love that? Next category is new to me authors that I think I could give 5 stars to this book. First up, we have The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. Oh, it's covered by the flowers too. This is a historical fiction. It is not a historical fantasy. It is just a historical fiction about women in a brothel in ancient Rome. I sampled some chapters sometime in 2025, and I absolutely loved the opening chapter of this. This is actually a trilogy. I have 2 historical fiction trilogies on my TBR, where I own the first book, and they both have wolf in the title. Wolf Hall and The Wolf Den. Just from that sample that I took of it, it seemed exactly what I want to read. Then earlier this year, I made a video in which I had you guys look at my entire physical TBR, and I asked for people to tell me which book of them they would most like me to read, and the answer resoundingly was The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve Dew. There are very few horror books that are universally loved, and this is one of them. It is a historical horror about a boy who gets sent to a reform school and the horrors that happen there, and a lot of the horror of this book is actually the real life things that happen to young Black boys who were sent to these reform schools. Tanana Reeve Dew wrote this because this is something that happened to a relative of hers. I want to say her uncle. Then we have Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is a romance I have been seeing everywhere. My friend Katie, who is like the only person I can trust with romance recommendations anymore, says I'm going to love, and so I trust her. But this is about two people who meet at a party. They both have limb differences and they sleep together. It turns out she gets pregnant and they decide that they're going to raise the baby together as friends, but of course they're going to fall for each other. Sounds delightful. Why didn't I put this one in the 2026 release pile? This is an author that I've not read from before that is a 2026 release, and that is The Subtle Art of Holding Space. I've talked about this a lot. This is a science fiction in which the universe is falling apart and our main character finds out that the thing that is keeping her mother awake in a coma is the thing that is making the world fall apart. Sounds fantastic, and I actually got approved for an e-arc of this. Very exciting. Then my last category is my 4 TBR veterans. I am going to try to read one of these a quarter. These are all books that I have owned for, I believe, at least 4 years. I think the most recent book that I've owned on here is from 2022, so I will have owned it for 4 years by the time I read it. This is going terribly. My mic died. For my TBR veterans for the last couple years, I put a Stephen King book on here because I own so many, and so I decided to pick the one that I think I have the greatest chance of liking that is also not in a series. So I picked Sleeping Beauties. This is about women who get found in like cocoons and then they wake up and they're weird. I don't know anything about it. All I know is that this thing is ages long. Why am I doing this to myself? Then I want to put a classic on here every year because I own so many. Last year, I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I didn't love Act 2, but I liked Act 1 and Act 3, and I read so many things that call themselves Dickensian, so I am planning on reading A Tale of Two Cities. This is one of the ones that I've owned the longest, and I think that this is kind of like a wider scale story than a lot of his other stuff because it's supposed to be taking place in 2 different locations. Then we have my aunt's used copy of The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. She gave this to me years ago after her book club read it. There's someone who is interviewing this author who famously wrote these 12 stories, but there's supposed to be rumors of this 13th one, and the author is telling the story of her life, but it's really unclear how much of it is fact or fiction. I feel like before Evelyn Hugo existed, this was Evelyn Hugo. And last up, we have a book that has haunted me on my TBR cart for years and years and years, for basically the entire time that I've had a TBR cart. The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This is historical fiction about Jesus. It asks the question, what if Jesus had a wife? I think it's looking at Jesus from the perspective of a historical figure. I made a list of books earlier this year that I owned but I wasn't sure I would like, and this was the only one that people had nice things to say about. All of the more recent books that are on here are books that I think I'm really going to enjoy. The TBR veterans are more, I've been putting them off, I just need to get around to them, but yes, those are all my 20 and 2026. So yeah, I think those are all of the booktube goals that I want to do for this year. Please let me know whether it's a number or something more nebulous. I would love to know how you would like to grow in your reading next year. If you would like to see me try to accomplish these goals, you can hit the subscribe button and see more videos from me. And if you'd like to find me anywhere else on the internet, you can find me at the links in the description. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.